It's great for me to be here too. I've been a regular attendee at these events for a long period of time now. In fact, when I was at Massey University, I used to come, and every year we'd come and help organise the tractor pull. Worthwhile going to see if they've still got it out the back here. So what I thought I would do is run through a few slides with you, and Minister Kay will follow, and then we're very happy to take a few questions before we've got to roar after our next event. Can I acknowledge all of the Ministry for Primary Industries officials who are here today? Wayne's got a sizable team here. You will find the site for MPI just in the main building over here. We have an awful lot of information on the site, a very good display. So if you're interested in getting into some of the detail in terms of picking up some of the literature that we're going to be talking about today, I encourage you to call in and have a look at the MPI site just in the main pavilion over here. So this is a little bit about Nathan Guy, Meet the Minister. I am from the Otaki electorate. I come from a farming family at Levin. We still live on the dairy farm. I have a local government background, had a few years on the Horowhenua District Council. I'm married to Erica, and we've got 3 very young kids, and they're the ones that certainly keep me well grounded. Just to give you a bit of a snapshot, in terms of primary industries, we export around $30 billion per year. We are 72% of New Zealand's total exports, indeed the backbone of the New Zealand economy. And as you know, we are about 4.5 million people. We feed about 40 million people around the world. We export, some say, up to around 200 countries. Around the world, and it's great to see some of our international guests here today. Someone said there's 25 international delegations here at the Fieldays over the next few days. And of course, what you might also be interested to know is that the world population will reach 9 billion by 2050. Of course, how do we get our products into market? Well, the markets trust us because of our world-class food safety system. I know that Minister Kay is going to talk more about that, trust and integrity that we have in the marketplace. Now, primary industries, just to give you a bit of a feel before you head over to the site after this, there are 2,184 employees in 88 locations. It is the biggest government regulator, and the strategy for MPI is grow and protect. So the protect part is, of course, biosecurity, food safety standards, fisheries compliance officers, animal welfare inspectors, etc., border control, all of those things. And the grow part I'm going to also talk more about shortly. That's growing the New Zealand economy. So what are my priorities? The number one priority for me is biosecurity. I'll come on to that shortly. The second one, of course, is economic growth. The third one, I'm working closely with Minister Adams on water and RMA reform, and that's underway as we speak. And then, of course, there's Māori agribusiness potential, and red meat sector reform is another one that's pretty topical at the moment. If I just for 30 seconds give you a bit of a feel on the Māori agribusiness potential. So we've got about 1.5 million hectares of Māori land in multiple ownership. About 300,000 hectares is under full production. About 600,000 is under some production, 600,000 hectares. These are big numbers, not under much production at all. So if we can lift the capability in our Māori agribusiness, it's worth about $8 billion in exports, about 3,600 jobs. So there's a huge opportunity sitting on a massive land base. In terms of my number one priority, that's to do with biosecurity. And just to give you a feel for the border, it is a very, very busy place. So 175,000 items per day, 10 million passengers in and out across our border per year. And government funding has doubled since 2000, and of course we've got a real focus on the front line. We've got more dogs and dog handlers, more inspectors. We've got 56 staff have been recruited onto the front line in the last 6 months, and 30 new quarantine inspectors. We're out attracting them as we speak. We've got a real focus on our foot and mouth preparedness as well. We ran an exercise last year in the Beehive bunker. We're picking up all the recommendations from that and the recent report from the Auditor General. Wayne McNee has got a couple of his officials up in the UK working on a simulation exercise with them at the moment. We've been invited to go to Australia and work on their simulated exercise next year. We're going to run a desktop exercise later this month with key industry stakeholders coming along. So it's a real focus of mine and also of the government's. In terms of the next slide, which is all about doubling our exports. So I talked about how we're worth around 30 billion and we've set the target of 60 billion by 2025. So how are we going to get there? That's a fair question, isn't it? On there's about 3 or 4 things in how we're going to lift the overall performance of our primary industries. One is, of course, the Primary Growth Partnership, and I'll come on to that in a moment. The other one is the opportunities in irrigation. I'll come on to that shortly. I've talked about Māori agribusiness. And the other one is free trade agreements. And just lifting the overall productivity of our primary industry. So if we can get a 1% innovation gain in productivity across the whole of our primary industries, that's worth about $4 billion in exports per year. So just look at this market, hugely important to New Zealand. We've had a free trade agreement with Australia for 30 years. China's been the last 5 years. So just have a look at how our exports started off to China, worth about $2 billion, now almost $7 billion. This is now our biggest market in the first quarter of this year. It surpassed Australia. Primary Growth Partnership. So just this week we had an event in Parliament, co-hosted with Minister Joyce. So industry came to the national government when we got elected in 2008 and 9 and said, what are you doing on innovation, research, development, technology, transfer, etc.? And we said, well, if you come up with some good ideas, we'll back you. So 13 projects are pretty much up and running now, and they're across a whole wide spectrum. And once again, if you go to the, I should be in sales, shouldn't I? If you go to the MPI site, you will pick up this document here that runs you through those projects. So the size of the prize, where it's 50 cents in from the government in most places and 50 cents in from the industry, is an $11 return by 2025. It's worth about $7 billion to us every year from 2025 onwards. Very, very exciting projects. In the red meat sector, we've got processing companies, banks, beef and lamb, meat producers accessing the best available farm and business practices and using technology and better coordination in the marketplace. What else are we doing? We're focused on infrastructure as well. So we're rolling out ultra-fast broadband in the cities and towns pretty much up and down the country. Rural broadband has been very successful, and that's happening as we speak. We've got a big infrastructure program underway with 7 roads of national significance into our main cities, and of course that's where our big productive ports are, so that helps getting the produce out into market more efficiently. We've got RMA reform happening and irrigation. Just on RMA reform, we want to have greater national consistency with these plans, fewer and better resource management plans, and more efficient consenting. We also want to make sure that there's enough economic rigour in some of these plan changes that councils might be proposing as well. So we're coming through probably the worst drought that we've had in the last 70 or so years. And by and large, I think we've had a pretty good autumn. The grass has responded in a pretty positive fashion. But there will be some pain that is felt from this drought into the next season or so. So what has become apparent to me is that we don't have a water shortage issue in this country. We have a water storage issue. We only collect about 2% of the annual rainfall that falls in this country. Most of it gets into your local rivers and streams and just roars out to sea. So only 2% of the rainfall is captured and stored and utilised over the summer months. That's where the government says we want to partner with some of these regional water storage projects to get them up and running. So we've said there's 400 million, 80 million in this budget. We're setting up a Crown-controlled company that's going to make the decisions on which projects get up and running. There's 400,000 hectares, we know, of land that has potential to be under irrigation. Of course, that's worth about $4 billion in exports. It's also good for the environment as well because you can maintain your summer river flows, and that's hugely important for aquatic and bird life, etc. So big exciting projects are underway in irrigation, and in fact Ruataniwha, which is the one in Hawke's Bay, the Minister for the Environment, Amy Adams, our colleague, called that project into the Board of Inquiry this week, so that's a 9-month process for that project to go through. Just finally, before I hand over to Minister Kay, just to give you a bit of a feel for my recent trip with the Prime Minister to Latin America. We covered a massive amount of distance, 4 countries. So just to give you a couple of top-line numbers, Mexico, 193 million people, joined up with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Colombia has 46 million people. Their President, Santos, stood up in the public part of the meeting in front of the New Zealand media and said, I'd love to have a free trade agreement with New Zealand, and that's going to be hugely important to us going forward. So officials are working in that space as we speak. Chile is very much a cousin of ours. It faces towards us. We're doing a lot of joint venture work with businesses in that market. And Brazil, an interesting couple of figures in Brazil. So if you look on your world map, Brazil's about the same size as Australia. Australia, as we know, pretty much dryland farming. Brazil, pretty much green oasis. 200 million people in Brazil, 200 million cattle. 3/4 of their dairy herd is hand milked. So there's opportunities for New Zealand business to work in joint ventures, whether it's milking machine companies, whether it's True Test, whether it's Gallagher's, whether it's agri-seeds. All of the opportunity in Latin America is ginormous for us. But it is a hard place to do business. The taxation regime's very high, tariffs are ginormous, and there are corruptions issues. So some of these countries aren't easy, but the potential for us, when we've been focused on our historical markets of Europe, North America, and directly above us up into Asia, this is going to be an important part of us and how we evolve into the future. Last slide there, that's a very good relief milker at one stage in the Guy cowshed. So I'll just conclude, that's the Prime Minister who was at the time the Leader of the Opposition. I'll just conclude by saying to you, I'm very passionate about my role. It's very important to the New Zealand economy. We've set some very ambitious targets. Government can only do so much. The key players in the room today can do so much in terms of lifting the overall performance, and by and large farmers are fantastic innovators and they're very focused on environmental sustainability as well. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'll now hand over to my colleague, Minister for Food Safety and a whole lot of other things that Nikki does, Minister Kay.